Okay, I'm actually excited about this interview.
Hello and welcome to the Haaretz podcast. I'm Allison Kaplan-Summer. Congressman Ro Khanna's visit to the West Bank may have only lasted for 3 days, but its impact and aftermath has and will last far longer than that. On July 11th, just after his return to the United States, the California congressman who represents a district in Silicon Valley posted on his media platforms that Israeli settlers brandishing American-made M4s detained me and other Americans on my trip to Palestine. When the IDF arrived, they sided with the settlers and continued our detention. They made a huge mistake. On the same day, a story appeared in the New York Times. American politicians.
I was trying to figure out if there was any footage in the interview, and I don't think they've shown it. So what I try to do is when I put this interview together, I'll put some footage there for us.
Petition blocked by Israeli settlers in the West Bank, where past U.S. leaders toured the region to show support for Israel. Today's Democratic presidential aspirants are going to bolster their credentials as critics. And indeed, Khanna is a much referred to aspirant for the 2028 Democratic nomination for the presidency. In the days since the incident, there has been an intense back and forth over it, every moment of which has been put under a microscope between Israel and its defenders and Congressman Khanna, who has said that every American should be outraged by what happened and called for the arrest of both the settlers and soldiers who, he said, took the side of the settlers. I'm very pleased that the congressman and the possible 2028 presidential candidate has agreed to come on the Haaretz podcast to discuss not only that incident, but the huge shift in policy positions regarding Israel happening in the Democratic Party and whether the post-October 7th years of war have changed his own political perspective. Congressman Khanna, welcome to the Haaretz podcast, and thank you so much.
The problem here is, for me, we keep talking about post-October 7th, and for a lot of us, this started way before that. What about October 6th, the 5th, the 4th, and the subsequent previous weeks and months and years when folks like us and many in the world were aware of what's happening there in the Middle East?
So much for agreeing to join us.
Thank you. They tell me you're the oldest daily newspaper in Israel. Is that correct?
Absolutely, absolutely. Since many decades before the founding of the state.
But the government doesn't like you, apparently.
No, the governments in many countries are not big fans of the free press. You might have noticed that.
And Haaretz has done a reasonable job ever since October 7th to slowly start to question the mainstream narrative and the establishment narrative in Israel. And they've done a reasonable job and have gotten a lot of flack for it as well.
Congressman, all of your interviews so far have been hyper-focused on this one incident. But I would like to start at the beginning so we can put it into context. Why did you make this trip at this time, and what were you trying to accomplish? I ask because there have been so many wild accusations that this incident was a publicity stunt and somehow getting a confrontation on camera was the purpose of your visit. So can you just start with who initiated and coordinated this trip? What did you do in your 3 days, and why did you come?
I wanted to see the occupation from the lens of the Palestinians. I have been to Israel 3 times before. I met with Prime Minister Bennett and Prime Minister Netanyahu. I had come on a delegation with Speaker Pelosi, with the Armed Services Committee. And many years back, I had actually come on Project Interchange with the AJC, with a group of Indian Americans around 2005. But all the times I came, we would go once to Ramallah, met with President Abbas, met with business leaders, but I never really saw the occupation from the lens of Palestinians. And so I was talking to Jasper Nathaniel. He's a journalist who's in the occupied West Bank. And he said, come while I'm here. We'll get you Palestinian-led guide and perspectives, and you'll really be able to see firsthand how devastating life is for Palestinians and Palestinian Americans. So that is why I went on this trip.
So when this now famous incident happened, however, you were being guided by an Israeli, by a member of Breaking the Silence, that activist organization, right?
Well, we were largely on a trip led by Palestinians. We went to Hebron, the Palestinian side, led by a Palestinian. We were in places in villages where Palestinians and Palestinian Americans invited us into their homes. We were in Beit Sahur and Bethlehem and Beit Jala, where we met with Palestinian leaders. But Nadav, who's done incredible work at breaking the silence, said, I want to take you to this village, Zanuda, that has been destroyed by the extremist settlers, Yanan Levy and others. And I want you to see the elementary school so you can see settler violence firsthand. And so for that portion of a few hours, Nadav took us there. The irony is that was the most routine part of the trip. He had taken Congresswoman Delora and Congressman Kasten there 4 or 5 months ago without incident. And so we got onto a van with him. There were 2 other Americans with me, Cam Kasky and Ben Linder, Jewish Americans, some Palestinians. And there was a New York Times photographer with us the whole day because she was documenting my trip. She was with us in Hebron and other parts of that day to see what it was like seeing the West Bank through the lens of Palestinians.
So with that all said, can you go over again, sort of step by step, what happened to you?
Well, it's not very controversial. I don't know why Israel just doesn't take accountability, apologize, have investigations, and move on. The reality is we were at Zanuda village. There were 2 extremist settlers who came up, one brandishing an M4. We were quickly told to get into our van, and they blocked our van from exiting.
Oh, gute Sache. מה קורה חבר'ה? דיברנו עם מי המפקד של הפטרול? מי? דיברנו עם המשטרה ואמרו פשוט תזיזו אותם כדי שאנחנו נוכל לצאת, אז אני לא מבין מה הבעיה פה.
המשטרה בדרך והמשטרה תגיד לנו מה לעשות.
אבל הרגע דיברתי עם השוטר בטלפון.
שהשוטר יבוא לפה.
לא, אבל הוא אמר שהוא הולך להתעכב. אז אתם יכולים לעלות מול החמ"ל ולטפל בזה, כי אנחנו דיברנו כבר. יש פה חבר קונגרס שדיבר, אני נדב, היי. יש פה חבר קונגרס אמריקאי. יש פה חבר קונגרס שדיבר עם השגרירות, והשגרירות מעורבת בזה, אז אני לא מצליח להבין את כל הסיפור. אתם יכולים להעיף את החבר'ה האלה.
נכון, אסור לך להיות פה, משטרה כבר אמרה לך שאסור לא להיות.
חלק מהצבא. זה קצת נשמע שכל חקודות מהם.
מה המשטרה?
הבנתי, אז אתם בוחרות לא לסייע במצב הזה. אתם בוחרות לא לסייע, זה הסיפור.
המשטרה כבר פגשה אותך פה, נכון חבר? ומה היא אמרה לך שאסור לך להיות פה, נכון? כשאתה חי סגור. נכון, אתה שם זין על כולה.
The reality is we were at Zanuda village. There were 2 extremist settlers who came up, one brandishing an M4. We were quickly told to get into our van, and they blocked our van from exiting. You can't do that. I mean, I've called it detainment. You could call it false imprisonment. The bottom line is we couldn't leave the road. There were no signs there. There was nothing that says that it was a restricted zone. If anything, the restrictions were on extreme settlers who had destroyed that village. And like I said, members of Congress came before. Now, first, the IDF put out a statement saying it was a restrictive zone. Now they've walked that back, and the Jerusalem Post has concluded that it was not a restricted area. And now they're saying, well, the extreme settlers thought it was restricted. Well, even on that account, they basically detained us with a false assumption about the site. And they were cursing at us. They were kicking our tires. They were laughing at us, wiping our windshields. They didn't let us go, even when we said we were in the American embassy. They called other extremist settlers, their friends, who further detained us, blocked us in. And then when the IDF came, the IDF also said, no, we believe the settlers. We are not going to let you through. And it really took David Brownstein at the American Embassy, the number 2 person, calling a senior person in the Israeli Foreign Service, or whoever he called, that led the Israeli police to come, at which point they scattered 75 to 90 minutes into it.
Yes.
So what I find it hard to believe is that someone of Ro Khanna's stature, a congressman, other Americans, Palestinians, photographers, that all of these folks were there and no one informed the IDF people, which that does not make sense to me at all. The way Ro Khanna was treated by the settler and by the IDF could be a way of sending him a message that you can't just ignore the Israeli government's asks or demands about adhering to certain protocols. And then they decided that, you know what, we'll teach Ro Khanna a lesson. Let's see.
So when the IDF statement came out saying that the soldiers had dispersed the settlers, you basically said that was a lie.
Well, that is a lie, and the Jerusalem Post shows it's a lie. Even now, they've walked that back. I mean, the IDF and the video camera shows they didn't disperse the settlers. So I'm actually probably even more disturbed about the government's lies than I am about the incident itself that was harrowing. But, you know, one of my, Cam Kasky had a panic attack on my team. He's a Parkland survivor. Ben Linder, a Jewish American, also wrote about how harrowing the experience was. Nadav has talked about it. You know, it's not just me. It's a lot of other folks. And that's why the New York Times talked to our security person. The reporter talked to the New York Times photographer who was there and was thoroughly reported. And then the IDF basically lied. And to this day, we have not had a commitment to investigate those settlers. At the very least, the settlers need to be investigated. You can't just be a civilian and block any person from leaving and brandish M4 guns and mocking them and think that's acceptable. Even if it was a restricted zone, you couldn't do that. Well, it turns out it wasn't a restricted zone, but that's vigilante justice. They need to be investigated and prosecuted. My suspicion, from what I've been told, is that they're connected to Yanan Levy. He needs to be investigated and prosecuted, not just for what he did to Zanuda village, not just if he had a connection to those extreme settlers, but also for his murder of Ottawa. And I met Ottawa's brother, Khalil. And this guy is still roaming around, free. I mean, it's like the law of the jungle. And his outpost needs to be demolished. So I'm going to be meeting the ambassador. The ambassador said he wants to meet with me, and these are going to be my very simple demands. And then we need to have an investigation on those 4 IDF officers. Why were they not letting us through? Why did they take the side of the settlers?
Yes, the Israeli ambassador to the U.S., Yechiel Leiter, wasn't very nice to you on his comments in the media. He said the whole thing was concocted somehow to distract from the scandal around former Senate candidate Graham Plattner, who you supported. And he said it was suspicious that it happened on Wednesday and that you only went public with it on Saturday and not in real time.
Well, with due respect to the ambassador, he doesn't really understand American politics. If he did, then Israel's approval ratings wouldn't be as low as they are. The reason that it was reported on Saturday is that we did not want to have any news break until I was out of Israel, and the New York Times respected that. And so we were on Thursday still in the West Bank going to Palestinian areas. And in some cases, after we left certain of these towns, I don't remember the names off the top of my head, settlers came an hour later. So I didn't want to be out there saying I was, for security reasons, in the West Bank. And then the New York Times on Friday was verifying the reporting. They were talking to our security guard, to the New York Times photographer, to other people in the delegation. So they knew it would be a very sensitive report, and they wanted to get the facts right. And that's why we waited till the New York Times report came out. And that came out, I think, Saturday morning.
What did you think of Prime Minister Netanyahu's response on Meet the Press that settler terror is merely 150 juvenile delinquents that are not really part of the settler community? He said that actually in several U.S. media interviews, and downplays their activities, saying it pales in comparison to Palestinian terror.
Well, first of all, this is just his talking point. But let's just take him at face value that he's calling these juvenile delinquents. Why haven't they been arrested? Their pictures are all over social media. My understanding is that they're connected to Yanan Levy. Why has Yanan Levy not been arrested? I can give you the names of other extremist settlers for having talked to Palestinians and Palestinian Americans. But the next American president will demand the arrest of these violent settlers. This is not going to be some dialogue with Israel. It will be a clear directive to Israel that they need to arrest these violent settlers. They need to demolish the outposts. They need to stop the terrorizing of the Palestinian people. I met a Palestinian father who was grieving for his 14-year-old Palestinian-American son. His Palestinian-American son, born, raised in the United States, came to the West Bank. The father admits that he threw rocks at one of the cars, but the IDF soldiers shot him 21 times for throwing rocks. And he has had no justice, no investigation. And he was talking about how the room of his son is still the same, not changed. I went to a school that had a shooting. Principal showed me the blood of the 14-year-old, 15-year-old who was killed. And he was never consulted by the IDF or the police. He still doesn't know if that shooter is out in and free. I met a family, a Salman family in El Khair, whose house every night is attacked by settlers, every other night. The 18-year-old daughter was studying, can't study there anymore. Windows rattled, an Israeli flag planted on a Palestinian home. It is inhumane and cruel what's going on. People in Hebron throwing rotten tomatoes, throwing acid, urinating on Palestinian shopkeepers. If you want to see the cruelty of humanity, go spend a day in the occupied West Bank.
What do you say to those like Netanyahu, however, who say that you don't balance it with the cruelty of the other side of Palestinians towards Israelis?
First of all, I'll say that there has to be an end to the occupation and justice in the West Bank and in Gaza. I have always believed and still believe in Jewish self-determination, in a secure Israel as a Jewish democratic state with equal rights, which treat people with equality and dignity. And I condemned Hamas as a terrorist organization. I condemned Hezbollah's terrorism. I've condemned the October 7th terrorist attacks. I have met with people in my office, with John and Rachel Poland, who lost their beloved son Hirsch. I did my very, very, very little part to try to advocate for the release of Hirsch. Obviously, he was brutally murdered. My heart breaks for the families of the hostages. My heart breaks for the victims of October 7th. But I want a way forward for peace.
Wait, is he crying? Are those tears in his eyes? Oh my God.
For a secure, democratic Israel living side by side with a Palestinian people and a Palestinian state where we can have a just peace.
You make no secret of the fact that you're weighing a bid for the presidency in 2028. I really appreciate, your passion and your commitment to this issue, and that it is genuinely, touching you and moving you, and you want to do something about it. But in cold political terms, I'm curious. Israel-Palestine has always been kind of a niche issue with voters and very rarely at the top of concerns when they actually vote. Do you believe that things have changed, that this is not the case, that when it comes to voters, especially Democratic voters, that this is a top tier issues? And do you think it's resonant enough to make it such a key element of your potential presidential
I feel like that's such a disingenuous question because the Democrats and the audit that came out was very clear about what they did not want to talk in it about. Mainstream journalists still struggle to understand that the world has had enough of this genocide, and they want to only bring in politicians, any form of violence, especially the ongoing genocide, and how we're supporting it.
Campaign?
Well, my core focus is economic patriotism. How do we tackle the wealth inequality in our country? I represent Silicon Valley. I grew up in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. I saw Fearless Works shut down. I saw steel plants shut down. I've seen wealth concentrate in the hands of a few in my district. And I believe that we need a new deal in America. We need a Marshall Plan for America where we have economic security, economic dignity for people across this country. And a lot of my work has been on those economic issues. But I also believe that we need an America that is moral and has moral leadership in the world. And my view is that the issue of Palestine and the injustice in Palestine has become a rallying cry for whether you believe in a moral American foreign policy, whether you believe in standing for principle and not being influenced by lobby groups or the status quo powers to be.
Yeah, you spoke about lobby groups. In June, you became the first sitting member of Congress to sign a formal pledge refusing to accept donations or even political support from AIPAC, and explicitly campaigning in this pledge that you signed against the influence of pro-Israel AIPAC money. Defenders of AIPAC say that, hey, Americans joined together in PACs to support all kinds of causes they believe in, gun control, climate change, even Middle East peace. J Street has a PAC. So they say, why shouldn't supporters of Israeli policy do the same? Is it the principle of AIPAC, or is it just the scale of AIPAC's influence that you object to?
Well, I object to all PAC money. I have been for banning super PACs. I don't take a single dime of PAC money or lobbyist money. I'm for getting all of that money out of our political system. And I'm for a constitutional amendment to regulate large amounts of private spending. It has no place in our politics. I don't question the American citizens' right who are pro-Israel to join AIPAC and play under the rules of the system. The system is broken, and I have been for banishing all PAC money. But I also, as an American politician, have the right to not take their financial support, just like I would not take support from a big oil PAC or.
I think the distinction that he's making here, AIPAC versus Jewish people who want to join AIPAC or want to support AIPAC, that's a good distinction to make, because whether the majority of the people like it or not, there are people, Jewish and otherwise, who still support AIPAC and will continue to do that.
From the NRA. So I don't say that AIPAC can't participate in politics. I don't question the loyalty of an American citizen who is very the Netanyahu government and wants to advocate for that. They have every right to do that. And I have every right to say that I don't want their support.
Have the years of war since October 7th, the experience of watching what's happened in Gaza and perhaps what you're observing now in the West Bank, has it changed your fundamental positions on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict? You stated them a little bit earlier in this interview. In the past, you've defined yourself as supporting Zionism, Israel's right to exist, and you even said that it's anti-Semitic to oppose the existence of a Jewish state, which essentially is Zoran Mamdani's position. In the past, you've also not supported the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement. I'm just wondering, you've been much more outspoken on the Palestinian issue in recent months, years. Do you feel like something's fundamentally changed in you since before October 7th, 2023?
Yes. And initially, my sympathy, if you look in my statements in the first couple months after October 7th, were all with Israel, with the horrific terrorist attack, with the hostages. I was sickened by what happened. But the response in Gaza was so disproportionate, so inhumane, that it just really affected me, seeing the children being killed. I was in Dearborn at the Wall of Tears, and there is a wall with the names of the children, about 18,000 children, all with their ages. And that deeply affected me, the genocide, as I have called it, in Gaza. I believe it was a genocide, but even if people who don't believe it was a genocide, it certainly was just awful crimes, and the pushing of the Palestinian population all the way down to southern Gaza. And I was deeply affected with this trip to the West Bank and seeing how Palestinians are being treated. Now, I want to move forward towards a peace, and I believe that we can get there if we stop the aid to Israel, if we stop military sales that are being used to kill civilians, if we demand, not request, but demand the arrest of violent settlers. That's something that can happen in 100 days. You don't need a long peace process for that. If we demand the removal of these outposts, if we begin to demand the removal of illegal settlements, even under Israeli law, if we begin to sanction the banks and the construction companies that are continuing to build there, and then if we work towards a peace process modeled after the Arab peace plan on what a Palestinian state would look like, there may be some settlement swaps where you have some settlements near Jerusalem there that are part of Israel and others, Palestinians in Israel, that become part of Palestine. There are a lot of creative ways of doing that. But I do believe that you can keep Israel as a Jewish democratic state if you end the occupation and the apartheid there, and if you have a Jewish state that has equal rights. I mean, you have England, for example, with the Church of England working towards having equal rights for British citizens. And the hope would be to have a Jewish state with equal rights and end the occupation, and a Palestinian state as well.
You still believe a two-state solution is not only desirable but possible?
I think it's much harder than I anticipated. A Palestinian state with some of the land swaps and stopping the settlements. But I also believe that there are things we can do immediately, right? Part of the challenge is we keep talking about the hypotheticals of peace. What are we doing to eliminate the outposts, to arrest the violent settlers, to allow Palestinians to drill for water, to make sure that they aren't subject to the cruelty of the checkpoints? So I would argue that the next American administration needs to work towards justice now while adopting a broader framework for peace. I do think the conditions on the ground make a two-state solution much harder, and every new settlement that goes up makes it harder. But I still believe that era peace plan has some possibility of working, and we've not tried it. We've not really had an American administration, probably since George Bush Sr., who has put real pressure on the Israeli government to get to a peace.
Back to the issue of military aid. Together with Republican Congressman Thomas Massie, you have been leading the charge to strip the National Defense Authorization Act of Section 224, which would deeply intertwine the U.S. and Israeli militaries' unprecedented integration of the weapons industry and wider industries. Are you still part of that fight? And I'm also interested, you said that you believe in ending military aid. Netanyahu is a little bit on the same page with that. He wants to move the dynamic from aid to partnership, and that's why obviously he's in favor of this section of the act. Can you clarify your position?
Well, I'm for ending all military aid. I didn't know Netanyahu was for that too. He should endorse the Massie Amendment if he's for that, and we'll get more votes for it this week because that's what the Massie Amendment does. It zeroes out all aid to Israel, military aid. So
he says he wants it phased out, and he says he wants it to transform from aid to partnership, and that this act and the section of the act kind of personifies the partnership.
Well, if he's sincere about that, he should endorse the Massie Amendment. I'll wait after this interview for him to announce the arrest of the settlers who detained us and the endorsement of the Massie Amendment. But beyond that, we can't have Section 224, Section 219, which is kind of Netanyahu's clever ploy, which is to basically integrate America's military with Israel's military and joint produce all the weapons and compromise American sovereignty. And that would allow for the sale of these. You wouldn't even need the sale. That would allow for Israel to get these weapons, bypassing American foreign sale laws. And I led the effort with Massie to strip Section 224 from the House Armed Services Bill. I did it in the Armed Services Committee, which I've been a senior member now. I've been on the committee for 10 years. And I will continue to work to make sure that we don't have that kind of integration. But one message I would give, and I gave this message to the Prime Minister, not that he probably cares much about what I think, but when I met him in 2024, and I said, Mr. Prime Minister, you may have won certain battles, but you've lost the war. And I want your readers to really understand this. Israel has lost Americans under 50. They've lost them. Not just Democrats, but Republicans. Thomas Massie won young Republicans by 30 points. And I just don't understand what the calculus is, because these young Americans are going to be the future members of Congress and senators and presidents, not just in 2028, but in 2032 and 2036 and 2040. And it is one of the most foolish strategies to have antagonized an entire American generation. And that's what Bibi Netanyahu has accomplished.
You have a lot of opportunities to speak to Israelis. You're speaking here to Israel's leaders, but you have a lot of expat Israelis in your district in Silicon Valley. So you must interact a great deal with Israelis. What do you say to them, and what do you say on this podcast, which is based in Israel, not just to Israeli leaders, but to Israeli people?
Israel has a lot of wonderful contributions to humanity. I've been there 3 times. And I've seen the science, and I've seen the education, and the poetry, and the innovation, and the contributions to moving human knowledge forward. And it saddens me that that contribution to human civilization is being corrupted because of an ugly occupation in the West Bank and Gaza, because of extreme elements that want to see the aspirations for a greater Israel, because of an unwillingness to recognize the humanity and dignity of the Palestinian people. And what I believe is that a new generation, hopefully, of leadership in Israel can emerge that wants to take seriously the dignity and aspirations of the Palestinian people. I'm inspired by how the Palestinians treated Cam Kasky and Jasper Nathaniel on this trip, because as ugly as it was, one of the things that I was so struck by is how warm the Palestinian people were. They welcomed us into our home, and Cam Kasky, a Jewish American, and Jasper Nathaniel, a Jewish American, were greeted with hugs and love and no resentment, but gratitude for them seeking new justice and a fight for justice. And there were many Israeli Jews there who were doing protective presence. And there was a love and gratitude that the Palestinian people had for them. They didn't have anger. They didn't have bitterness. They treated them with the kind of humanity that gives me hope for something going forward. And I just hope deep down the Israeli people, I understand the trauma of October 7th. I understand that it's in a tough neighborhood. I understand how hard the fight was for the foundation of Israel. But we can't go on this way. We need something better. Bibi Netanyahu, Donald Trump, they don't represent the best of humanity. My hope is that people like Cam Kasky and others, they represent where humanity should go. And that's my hope for the region and for the world.
I think that's as good a note as any to wrap up this interview. Again, Congressman Ro Khanna, I'm very grateful to you for coming on the podcast and having some of these tricky conversations about what's happening.
Thank you for having me.